So, dear guests, delegates, and participants, I would like to welcome you on behalf of the International Educational Development and Kurdistan Human Rights Geneva, as well as our co-sponsors, Minority Rights Group, Ensemble, contre, peine, mort, Amnesty International, Article 19, International Bar Association, Frontline Defenders, Women International League for Peace and Freedom, MIAAN, and Impact Coalition. It is a pleasure and honor for me to welcome our distinguished panelists for them to address some of the highly important issues discussed this morning during the interactive dialogue with FFM, including the Commission of Crimes Against Humanity of gender-based persecution, the violent repression against ethnic and religious minorities in the country, as well as the long-standing questions of justice and accountability in a country where impunity is the norm. As we heard this morning, the situation is unfortunately worsening in Iran. The popular mobilization is continuing through other forms. Despite the suffering, people continue to peacefully resist and challenge injustices and oppression. Unfortunately, Iranian authorities continue to refuse the legitimate demands of its citizens and try to silence these demands through violent and systematic repression. Women and girls continue to resist. The women life of the movement continues and pay a huge price, but the authorities are responding with increased repression and criminalization, rather than heeding the demands for change. Ethnic minorities, in particular the Kurds and the Baluchis, continue to play a very heavy toll in the massive and brutal repression that includes acts that have been found by the FFM to amount to crimes against humanity. Executions are reaching historical high levels. Despite repeated calls, and the ethnic minorities, especially the Kurds and the Baluchis, continue to be disproportionately overrepresented among those executed. Human rights violations continue unabated. Perpetrators are not only protected, but often promoted. Ladies and gentlemen, now without any further delay, I would like to turn the floor to our speakers, Ms. Nushin Sakrati, a human rights lawyer from Iran Times, who came from Washington to talk about the fact-finding mission and conclusions and how to prosecute the violators of human rights.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the organizers and the co-sponsors of this very important panel. As we are all here listening to the interactive dialogues of the Special Rapporteur and the UN fact-finding mission on the Islamic Republic of Iran, one thing has been repeated in both, which is that accountability must happen for the violations that have been perpetrated throughout the violence in Iran following the death of Masa Amini. As our chair has explained, we saw that serious violations of international law were carried out against women, children, including ethnic and religious minorities, and civilians who are protesting for women-like freedom throughout the protests. These types of violations are subject to international law. However, when Iran has not ratified the Rome Statute to give certain courts, like the International Criminal Court, jurisdiction to prosecute these crimes, we must look to third-party states to take action to hold perpetrators of this violence accountable. Third-party states have laws, there's laws as universal jurisdiction that allow them to go after individual perpetrators that have carried out certain types of serious violations of international law. And this includes the types of crimes against humanity that have been identified by the fact-finding mission and the Special Rapporteur. Our team at the Strategic Litigation Project has recently published a report on certain European jurisdictions that could use their laws to go after perpetrators of this type of violence. We identified different jurisdictions such as Belgium, Switzerland, Sweden, France, Germany, Sweden, all of which have the laws to go after perpetrators of this type of violence. However, most of these laws require the perpetrator to be physically present or for some of the victims to be nationals of that state. But there are certain countries like Germany and France and Sweden that can open up structural investigations. These are investigations that are not linked to any specific incident or specific victim or specific perpetrator, but can be open to better understand the conflict so that should an individual pass through that stage, should jurisdiction be possible in the future, they will be prepared. They will have the power to prepare quickly for a case to go after these individuals. And indeed, it was these structural investigations on Syria and in France and Sweden and Germany and Canada that led to significant accountability for the violence that we saw in Syria. It allowed for universal jurisdiction to be used in Germany. In many cases that have been successful, it also led to the development of the case that was brought before the International Court of Justice. So we really do urge states to read the fact-finding mission of Iran's report, which includes recommendations on seeking accountability for universal jurisdiction and to open up things like structural investigations. Should we also want to find other opportunities, there is now the International Court of Justice, which is allowing itself to have jurisdiction over violations of certain treaties. One such treaty, which Iran has ratified, is dealing with the rights of race. It's dealing with the issues of racial discrimination, which is a treaty that Iran has ratified. States could take action through the International Court of Justice to hold Iran accountable for crimes against humanity of racial persecution that was identified in the fact-finding mission's report. These are opportunities that need to be taken up so that we don't see the continued impunity for these types of acts within Iran that has been ongoing. And as the fact-finding mission that Iran has said in its report, accountability isn't possible within the states. We are not going to be seeing justice for the victims within Iran. We must go elsewhere to seek accountability. And one last point, our team is very focused on preserving evidence of this protest violence. So one thing that we have done is work with an organization named MIAAN, which is a German-based organization to help set up the Iranian archive, which has been preserving the social media evidence that has been shared, identifying some of these crimes against humanity carried out on protesters. This type of archiving and investigation will eventually allow us to support future investigations. But we do urge states to seek assistance now from the fact-finding mission while its mandate, when its mandate hopefully was released.
Thank you so much, Shah, for the valuable inputs. Also, thank you so much, Shah, for your important and valuable inputs and the ways of how to find opportunities to try some of these human rights creators, according to universal jurisdiction using some countries. Now I give the floor to our colleague, Ms. Scarlett Thompson, human rights activist who realized an important report in the gender-based persecution in Iran. Thanks for reminding yourself. Thank you.
And thank you for having me at this important event today. Has been an extraordinarily important day as we talk about accountability towards human rights violations and international crimes committed and perpetrated in Iran. Mission talked about mechanisms available to hold perpetrators accountable in third states, and so I'm going to speak about violations that we at HRA have documented that amount to these crimes that reach the level in order to to seek accountability in the United States. We have documented these crimes extensively in relation to the protests in Iran. But I want to make a note that it's important to recognize that these violations have not only been unique to these protests. They date back decades and decades, and it's important to recognize that they are not unique. They are persecuting women, minorities, LGBTI individuals, and I think it's important to recognize that at the outset. So while investigating the events that took place in relation to the recent protests, we, like the mandate of the FFM, look extensively at the issue of persecution on gender grounds. We also look at the intersection of politics, ethnicity, and religion, like my colleagues will speak about. In addition, our analysis looked at several acts that, in our eyes, amounted to severe deprivations of fundamental human rights, disproportionately affected women, girls, and LGBTI individuals, as well as minorities. We have found sufficient evidence to demonstrate that there has been international, intentional, and severe deprivation of fundamental rights contrary to international law. We determined that these victims were targeted solely because of their identity as a member of that group. We determined that these acts of persecution were committed in connection with other crimes and that they were part of a widespread and systematic attack directed against the civilian population and further the state's organization policy. According to our research, which we looked at 10 months after September 16th, these crimes or other acts included the extensive use of force resulting in death or serious injury, potentially amounting to murder, other inhumane acts in the form of deplorable conditions of detention and abuses committed at the time of arrest. We looked at abuses during the time of transfer, resulting in serious injury to the bodies or mental, physical health of detainees, torture, rape, sexual violence, imprisonment, violations of the right to peaceful assembly, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, expression and movement, the violation of the right to privacy, participation in public affairs, and the right to work and education, all with a nexus to gender. These acts were committed notably against women and girls for non-compliance with mandatory hijab, or for opposing established gender norms and discriminatory policies deeply embedded into the domestic judicial system. In fact, Iran's judicial system operates on a binary system of gender norms, which eliminates the acknowledgement of LGBTI individuals' existence under law. These violations were used to enforce restriction on women and girls and their supporters as they fled the streets. We have established that these acts highlight the Iranians' persecutory intent against women and girls. The multiple acts of violence committed by the Iranian security forces in the context of the protest undoubtedly amount to an attack. The widespread nature of the violence is every single province. We documented endlessly this violence from the outset of the protest following the 16th of September, but we continue to analyze these violations to this day. This is why it's extremely important that member states renew the mandate of the documented mission of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The pattern of abuse across the state, the public statements given, as well as the vast use of public resources, signals the systematic nature of the abuse. The public manner by which authorities denounced and demanded local police and security to violently repress protests signals that above acts was part of an official state policy where agents were acting under the direct order of high-ranking officials. I said it at the outset, but I think it's important as we're talking about the renewal of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur and of the fact-finding mission, that all of these acts, while the leading of the protests, have happened for decades. Iran is persecuting women, they're persecuting minorities, and they're persecuting LGBTI individuals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stella, for sharing some of the findings that you very good report with us. Now I'm going to pass the floor to my colleague Maria Shirani from Balochistan Human Rights Group, who is going to witness the situation in Balochistan, who have suffered some of the violent repression in human rights freedom.
So, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for the organizers, and to the guests, for coming out and listening to us. My name is Munira Shirani, I'm the director of the Kurdistan Human Rights Group. We document and monitor human rights, evaluate and human rights violations in Kurdistan and Iraq. I want to start out by giving a special thanks to the Special Rapporteur, Mr. Jalil Rahman, for his dedication to the mandate and to the independent fact-finding mission. We are grateful for the extensive work that they have done during this short period. We welcome the Special Rapporteurs and the human rights recognition of the crimes against humanity and their conclusion and findings that pervasive and deep-rooted structural and institutionalized discrimination against women and girls, permeating all areas of their public and private life, was both a trigger and an enabler of the widespread serious human rights violation under international criminal law committed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Countries such as the Islamic Republic of Iran, it's a mixture of peoples, languages, histories, but for centuries, the ruling elite has sought to eradicate that rich diversity, seeking to impose one ethnicity, one language, and one religion, basically excluding 70% of the population. Ethnic minorities, including Kurds, Baluch, Ahwazi Arabs, Azerbaijani Turks, have consistently been harassed, targeted, and victimized, denied their fundamental basic right to equality, deprived of their linguistic and cultural rights and identity. We also face extreme poverty and denial of basic political and economic infrastructure that is needed for growth and development in the country in an area. We have high levels of discrimination and access to justice and the political sphere. And we're denied education and employment rights. Healthcare and basic governmental services does not exist for us. The last few years, the international community have been able to witness how peaceful activism by members of the community minority have been deemed a threat to national security, resulting in disproportionate levels of arrest and execution. The protest that will later be known as Bloody Friday took place on the 30th of September 2022. This protest was a reaction against the rape of a 15-year-old girl by the chief police commander in Trabant. The protest was crushed by military forces, resulting in over 100 deaths and 300 injured. Governmental forces fired from rooftops, attacking people that were peacefully praying at the mosque nearby. Telephone and internet were shut off for many hours as a way to control the narrative. One should also here understand that the substantial budget for militarization, meaning the presence of the IRGC and the Bashij, is much, much higher in Kurdistan than we discussed. The Bloody Friday massacre is part of a longer historical persecution of minorities, I would argue, including deployment of disproportional military units to ethnic minorities region. The extreme lack of accountability as minorities are not protected by national legislation of civil rights to individuals in the country. In addition to the military repression, the so-called criminal justice system targets minorities for imprisonment and execution for political gain. In 2023, 834 individuals were executed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. 208 of them were Kurds. 177 of them were Baluch. We are basically 5% of the total population, but for decades we have been representing 20% of executions in Iran. So the majority of these cases of Baluch Kurds, they are prosecuted in extraordinary military courts with no due process or judicial protection. So no one has been held accountable for Bloody Friday. And these realities are not just policies and statistics, but they are lived experiences of millions of people targeted and essentially stateless but captive people in Iran. I want to tell you about one of them. The beautiful young man behind me, this is Sefer. He's 19 years old. His mother and father, both Baluch, worked hard to make sure that they had a good life for themselves and their children. 3 children whom they all sent to university. And they made sure that their children understood that they weren't just statistics. Sefer is a genius. He studies architecture at the university. He loves inventing. And he always has a smile on his face. He, like many young Baluch in Balochistan, wanted a better life and a better society for themselves. He became active in the demonstrations. He's several times threatened by the Revolutionary Guards, as he lives in a city where state-sponsored violence against people is a norm. He understands that the videos that he will post on his Instagram account are life-threatening for him. But he wants to make sure that the world understands his reality and millions of others like him. One day he does not come home anymore. His phone is off. His mother and father don't know where he is. His friends can't find him. The last message that he sent a friend is that he thinks he's being followed. A few days later, it is confirmed that he's held at a detention center by the Revolutionary Guards. And they promised that they will have him back in 2 days. He's just there for a small friendly chat. On the second day, the neighbor sounds the alarm that a body is lying on the rooftop of his mother's house. His aunt runs up the heavy stairs. And there lies his lifeless body, full of bruises and severe signs of torture. This beautiful young man had his whole life in front of him and the world in front of him. But he has, in fact, been murdered by the Islamic Republic of Iran. This was a month ago. For a Baluch, there's no such thing as access to accountability. No one has taken responsibility for the death of Sefer. No one lets his mother grieve in peace. No one recognizes a Baluch. Only this year, 2024, over 100 people have been murdered by the Islamic Republic of Iran. One of them was Sefer Shirani. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leader, for this very heartbreaking story of Sefer. And still is not only the case. Every year, thousands of Iranian young boys, Baluchis or Kurds, killed inside or outside of prisons in Iran. Historically, Balochistan becomes like Kurdistan, who was other minority areas, because of ethnicity and religion, they are subjected to multiple layers of oppression, both in law and practice. So on this, I'm going to turn the floor to my friend Raphael Hazan, who is the head of the Ensemble, contre, the French, maybe one of the largest organization in the world acting to abolish the death penalty in the world, and also the listening committee of impact and abolition.
Thank you very much, Timur. Thank you. It's very hard to follow the testimony of Munir. I'm very moved by all these stories and testimonies from Iraq. So I'm the executive director of ECPM Together Against the Death Penalty. And I often say that the death penalty is like the little bird in the mind. You know, this sign, this alarm, this warning alarm that something is getting very wrong. And definitely, this little bird is shouting, is warning in Iran. Something is getting wrong in Iran, and especially concerning minorities. Worldwide, definitely is targeting first the minorities. It's well known that minorities and ethnic minorities in China or in Saudi Arabia, for example, are particularly targeted by the government and with the death penalty. But in Iran, the death penalty is systematically used against all the different minorities. And not only since the women life freedom movement and the last 2 years. We really have to understand that the death penalty is used in Iran as a political tool, as a political operation against ethnic minorities, against political opponents, against foreigners, against gender minorities. Concerning the gender minorities, for example, last year, in our annual report on the death penalty in Iran, with our partner Iran Human Rights, we have documented an increase of 43% of the executions in 2023, and since the last 3 months of 2024, it's even worse than 43%. So in last year, just concerning women execution, 22 have been executed. And among these 22, 18 have been executed for murder related to domestic violence. So these women are double victims. They were victims of the patriarchal system in Iran and victims of the death penalty system in the country. It's important to remind, because we all know that the women life prisons has a lot of symbols among the gender issues. It's important also to remind this particular data of the death penalty. Concerning the LGBTQI+, it's very difficult to document the situation. It's very rare that people get the death penalty for being a member of the LGBTQI community. Even if Iran is one of the very few countries to have the death penalty for homosexuality, for same-sex conduct, and is one of the very, very, very few countries in the world, in the entire world, to apply death penalty for LGBTI. And last year, it's very, as I say, very difficult to document these facts. But if you take last year, 20 people have been executed for rape, because rape is possible with the death penalty in Iran. 20 people, and among these 20 people, we are not able to definitely say with precision, but we can presume, we can assume that some of them, some of the people who have been arrested for same-sex conduct had the choice to accuse the other one, the other partner, of rape. Otherwise, they could have both had the death condemned to the death penalty. So it's a reality of the LGBTI community in Iran, and it's a reality to take into account. Even it's another reality, the difficulty of the documentation situation. Going back to the ethnic minorities on the death penalty, it's not an elephant in the room. It's a mammoth. We publish this report every year. It's a 16 report, so since 16 years. And in the last 16 years, every year, we have the same conclusion. The death penalty target first ethnic minorities, and especially the Kurds and the Baluch. This year, in 2023, 20% of the executions were target the Baluch community, where they are represented. They represent only 2 or 4% of the overall population, and most of them. For example, if you take all the condemnations for Moharebe, Bahi, or HRC55, among the 39 executions last year, Moharebe, which is against God, enmity against God, corruption on earth, and armed rebellion. Bahi is armed rebellion. 21 of the 39 were for Baluch and Kurds, and 2 were against Afghans. So it's important to remind the figures. The figures are talking for themselves. It's a reality that cannot be denied, and it's a reality that took place since the last 20 years. And last but not least, and I would like to finish on that, most of this execution, especially on political views, minorities, ethnic, and others, are conducted on the revolutionary cause. 58 of the executions in the last 10 years took place under revolutionary cause, which makes the normality an exceptionality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafa, for this important statement about the executions in Iran strike out in minorities. Now, before giving the floor to our honorables that I'm saying, I would invite Mr. Zaniar to improve young Kurdish podcaster who is in the room and who lost an eye during the depression, to come here to the front. Is part of our colleague Shidam translating from Kurdish to English a similar statement. Yeah.
Reach your number.
But I would Kurdistan. As much as it's like seeking Kurdistan, but I would see never Roma and وهو يحتل صادوة لهذا الإنسان فاشل لهم إلى فاشل هم هذا مستشفى كان يقول شو خاملين يقول من يوفق من لو شفوا الأسبوعية ما نسمع من كل شيء نعم نزور سكولنا بس معناه إلى هو أوي مش بشر يكون في الإنسان آزاد بدين about
I'm speaking on behalf of a boy from Kurdistan. 18 months ago, a Kurdish girl named Gina was killed by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Because of this tragedy, first in Kurdistan, then Iran, then even Europe, people started protests on the streets because of the oppression of humanity, especially of women in Iran and Kurdistan. I was a drop in this wave of anger. Our goal was to end Iranian oppression and for me personally to see the free Kurdistan with my own eyes that our fathers and mothers had fought for 100 years.
طبعا بدأ حكومات إسلامية عند الشيوعية برمضان على الشاشة كاملة تحتاج تجمع كان يجنون من داران تجنونيش وقصدان حاولت تسمى تحتاج أصل وشاورت من الرفض.
Unfortunately, the Iranian government brutally shot young people, women and children on the streets, and like hundreds of my fellow citizens, I lost an eye by direct shooting.
إصلاح تنام بغلات في أصد بمترافيك بالجوار دعوات فين جينا وهم كوش براكان لكن كالساشا كمكان كردستان وبلوچستان دلاليان ليس صار براكان كمان الإسلامي ويرجع كتاب القصة.
Now that I am a refugee in a free and democratic country, I demand justice for the blood of Gina and all my brothers and sisters who were attacked by the repressive forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran, especially on the streets of Kurdistan and Balochistan.
وهي سايد مجوي وكان ما في مرض دعوة بدوار شون در صلاة كان يقول الموضوع أنجاب داني أو جنايات كالولايات وما الإسلامية وبدأ صدام بين المسلمين
In accordance with the United Nations law and human rights, I call on the European and other authorities to investigate and hope that the perpetrators of the crimes committed by the Iranian government will be punished and the revolutionary guards will be put on the terror list as soon as possible.
قربانی جنایی و سرفیت کمال اسلامی بود کشی بندر جلسه‌ای برلوزی. دعوت آمدوانی و نوکل انتخاب پیاده دیدار نفتی که ویان با واقعی درو که نور از خارج سانش کلا ترکیه و تنانت ایران زدیم و شرایطی پیشگویی روانی بوده امنیتی.
Finally, I would like to announce that there are hundreds of young boys and girls like me who have been victims of the crimes and repression of the Islamic Republic of Iran and have suffered physical and mental injuries. We call on the participants of the meeting to support the bonded who have taken themselves abroad and those who are currently living in Iraq, Turkey, and even Iran to be sent to safe countries for medical treatment. Thank you.
On this live example of the victims of repression in Iran, I'm going to report on the guest Madam Sarah Hussain talk more about the report.
Thank you so much. I think the last week they brought into us 19 states to have an investigation into what happened in Iran with the first these protests and actually into many other incidents that we've had. We've had the opportunity to look into these issues to the last year, along with that many in Iran. And I have to say, my colleagues, I think, are also being investigated and this is a very experience there. And we'll be very grateful to yourself and to the other organizations willing to work with you and work with them, which you know, the last year. Because I think as we work with the speakers, and as the last speaker made so clear, and he said that Germany's here, the refugee was able to speak and was able to demand justice, but that was not something that was possible for him when he was inside Rome. And we've seen, I think, we've really experienced some extreme challenges that people face in terms of trying to have their voices heard. And the lack of response that they get from the authority. We heard just now in the council chamber when we heard a speaker who was trying to put her point across about her experience of repeated detention and arrest. And she was told that she was not respecting the language. So I think we're living in this very inverted situation where trying to speak and trying to amplify the voices who speak the truth is extremely challenging because the frameworks within which we speak them, even in the Human Rights Council, even in the United Nations, are not always as expansive as they might be for certain things. So with those remarks, I'd just like to maybe tell you a bit about what we've done this year and what we found. As I said, it was extremely difficult. It was very difficult to investigate and document human rights allegations of human rights violations arising in relation to protests around every area of Iran, including Tehran. It was even more difficult doing so in relation to the minority areas, minority populated areas, and in relation to minority communities. But despite that, and I think because of the work of so many activists and human rights defenders inside and outside Iran, it was possible to make findings. We were able to, like you said, gather evidence, and we were able to gather direct testimonies also. And our finding was more clearly that in terms of the protests, I mean, there are many more findings to make, of course, because it remarked on in terms of structural discrimination and exclusion, and persistent and continuous violations of various kinds of development onwards. But I won't speak to those, but just to what we found in the context of protests. And we did find that minority populated regions are very much the hotspots for protests, and that a disproportionate number of human rights violations were reported in the areas. We were not able to adequately investigate the allegations and violations relating to all communities, but we were able to collect evidence in relation to Kurds and to Kurdistan, and we did find that they were disproportionately affected by the protests, and particularly in the context of course, deaths following the firings and the shootings on the protesters. We found the highest number of deaths reported in minority areas. I think we found 121 out of the 551 in total that of deaths, 121 from Sistan and Balochistan, 45 from Kurdistan, and 60 from West Azerbaijan. We also found a disproportionate number of arrests and detentions. One of the NGOs I agree that who worked on this identified that 43% of those arrested, so almost half of those arrested in the context of protests or Balochi or Kurdish. We also found patterns of intimidation and harassment, particularly of Sunni clerics, again, both in Sistan and Balochistan and the Kurdish regions. And the characterization of their demands and also of their criticism of the handling of the protests being conflated with inciting to violence. In relation to the killings, of course, there was the notorious incident of Bloody Friday, which many people will know about 30th of September 2022, when protests there were triggered by the news of the reading of a girl by a of a girl by a high-ranking police official in another town in Kurdistan. Once that news came out in the army force, people responded, there were protests, people began gathering outside the police station next to the center of the federal and security forces got heavy-handedly at protesters, including from the rooftop of the police station and the surrounding buildings. Witnesses we spoke to described it as a carnage and a massacre, with dead bodies lying everywhere, including the children. And we heard of the use of very heavy weaponry, including AK-47 and sniper rifles. There's a range of figures that have been documented. The highest number that we identified was 103 people killed that day, that same incident. One of the other particularly famous killings, sites of killings, was Germany, where we also documented similar patterns of very heavy-handed attacks. Again, the use of AK-47 is not a usual weapon of crowd control or law enforcement, but used on ordinary protesters. The use of Uzis, a machine gun mounted in vehicles. Here again, we found 6 people were killed in that incident. We've also found that from data from last year, again from MIAAN's database, we found that of the 936 verified cases of detained protesters in that year, some 43% were Kurdish and 16% were Kurdish. So very, very high numbers. And that's an estimated 10% and 2% of the overall national population. We also found, we looked at, when we went out to look at the allegations of sexual and gender-based violence, and we did find a number of incidents where the forms of sexual and gender-based violence took in minority documented regions was particularly severe, and also negative damages. So, for example, Kurdish women, when they were being violated before terrorists. Ultimately, we findings as a result that there were recent investigations that crime against humanity, of murder and torture, and object deprivation of liberty were committed in the minority areas. And we made findings of gender-based persecution, intersecting persecution on grounds of ethnicity. Our work actually is still not entirely over. CRP, a conference report has been released today where we find many of the details of the kinds of attacks that were made and the kinds of violations that affected minority communities around the context of the projects. We are still able to hear from others for the moment. It's important for us to say that our mandate, as we all know, I think was for this 1 year, and we therefore have done our very best to put as much information as we could possibly together. But it was difficult, it remains difficult, as we all know very well. And we think that's one reason why it's very important to try to continue this work as well as possible, because people have only just begun to find an opportunity to have these facts and these things being recorded and being begun to be heard by the international community. And that is an almost easy process. There's a little switchback, as you can see. But I think that doesn't mean that one should now stop the dam. They can should burst and the information should flow out as much as it can. And we really hope that we can continue to support their work and whatever it's better. So it's sort of a backfinding mission or to whatever we can actually do individual capacities as sort of kind of survivors.
Thank you so much, Madam Singh. On behalf of the organization, who's on human rights in Geneva, and also Impact Foundation, as well as all processes, I would like to express our gratitude to you, to your colleagues and your team for the wonderful work you have done in the past years. And as the French philosopher Albert Camus says, nothing is more noble than to give a voice to people whose voices are taken by the dictators. So I thank you.